I was just saying, did Jake Browning win the number 2 job? I mean, did he take the bull by the horns for you?
Yeah, I thought Jake did a good job. I thought both those guys really gave us what we wanted there that last 2 weeks. But Jake was deserving of that opportunity, so he's the number 2 quarterback, and feel confident with where he ended training camp at.
Would you kick the tires elsewhere for a number 3 at this point?
We'll give it 24 hours to see how it all shakes out at the quarterback spot.
That being said, does that include potentially finding somebody who could come in and be the number 2, or are you set on Jake be the number 2 no matter what happens over the next 24 hours?
I feel really good about Jake being the number 2.
Zach, Stanley Morgan obviously has been a big part of your guys' team, special teams for him. Is there a thought or plans of trying to maybe bring him back as part of another IR return, or is this just a really tough cut that you had to do in special teams room?
Yeah, it was a tough conversation, certainly. He's been a part of 4 years worth of teams here and been a part of a lot of the ups and downs. So difficult conversation when you're dealing with guys like that. Certainly appreciate Stanley and I love Stanley. And again, we'll continue to see how things shake out these next couple of days.
Kind of the same thing with Mike Thomas. Zach, he has said he'd be interested in coming back to the squad. Anything there? Would he be an option there?
Similar. I mean, those are 2 guys that, of course, have been very valuable to us for a lot of different reasons, and 2 of the harder conversations certainly today.
From a health
injury
standpoint,
wise, yeah.
Go ahead, Charlie, and then I'll get you James. Go ahead, Charlie.
are there any, kind of the in-season IR? Are there any guys that might be going on to that, or have you avoided with, where you're at from a health standpoint, needing to put anyone on that short-term IR?
Yeah, we'll see. No decisions have been made today on any of that.
Along those lines, how is Joseph Osai doing after the other night?
We're going to get more information here today and tomorrow to be a little more conclusive on that.
You mentioned that there were some decisions that kind of came down to the wire over the last few days. What are these few days that lead up to cut down day like for you guys in terms of those decisions, but also in terms of the conversations that you inevitably have to have?
Yeah, you meet upstairs, for the last really 3 days since the game with Duke and his staff and ownership, and make sure everyone's voice can be heard on how everybody feels about the roster and where we need to end up. And at the end of the day, always get on the same page and feel really good about, the 53 guys that made the team.
Zach, I know cut down days always tough. Was it almost more challenging this year? Because even coming into camp, at least from my view, it didn't feel like there were many spots potentially available. And I know there's always competition, but was this even harder to get to 53 than past years?
I think it was. I would agree with that. In my 5 years here, I think this is the hardest, and it is the hardest because you have a higher number of quality players that are worthy of being on it, as opposed to maybe there's years where you have 49 or 50 and you're trying to sort through it. And it can be difficult that way too. But I think this year just I thought our 90-man roster was as strong as it's ever been, and so obviously that leads to more difficult decisions there for the final 53.
Does it say about your special teams and the depth of this team that you took 2 veterans and waived them essentially?
Sure. I mean, it's you're relying on some younger players at some of those positions. That's the nature of pro football, and you need these young guys to step up. And somebody said earlier, grab the bull by the horns and take ownership of the responsibilities they have now. And so again, we're encouraged with all those young guys. We feel obviously like they can do it. Now they just got to do it once the real season starts here.
Lyle Collins still on PUP, but where is he at in your plans for this season?
Still weeks out, certainly. So hard for me to predict that right now.
I know you said you'll see about whether Burrow practices or not, but given all the time since he had the injury in July, where is he at from a health perspective as we get ready for that season opener in week 1?
Health other than the calf, you mean?
Well, just how is it? How is he from a health perspective as he gets as y'all get ready for week 1?
I think he has a very healthy body, and I'm encouraged by that.
Just following up one more on Joe Burrow, is there any connection to his practice availability to what's going on with his contract situation?
No.
There are still decisions to be made on the practice squad tomorrow, and so much is made of the 53-man roster and the cuts that happened today. How important is it though for specific guys, for you all to get specific guys on your practice squad? And why are those decisions important?
Well, twofold. It's really now just an extension. To me, you have a 69-man roster with 21 inactives on game day because you can standard elevate, with the COVID rules that have become permanent rules for us. So there's a group of guys on the practice squad that you feel like, man, these guys could play for us quickly on game day if you have an injury or the situation calls for it. And then there's other guys that are more developmental, maybe younger guys that you want to keep in your system and on your roster and in your organization that you continue to develop. That maybe they aren't ready to play in a real game right now, but you feel like in time they will be, and so you want to continue to invest in them. So I'd say with the larger practice squad now with 16 players, different guys fall in different places on the scale, but they're all here because we think that they're going to ultimately help our organization.
Zach, I want to ask you about two rookies, the first of which, Charlie Jones, obviously came in battling for that punt returner job. What did you see from him? I assume that had something to do with moving on from Trent.
I think he improved every single week. I think he became more and more comfortable with what we're asking him to do, continued to make more and more plays in the games and in the practices to the point where we felt comfortable making this decision. Again, it's hard anytime you're parting ways with a player like Trent Taylor, who we have a lot of respect for. He's made some big plays for us over the years. That's a difficult decision. But it does speak to Charlie and the improvement we feel like he's made, and we feel like his best days are certainly in front of him.
And then DJ Ivey. It was a pretty stacked cornerback room coming in, I think, when he was drafted. And for him to be able to make a push to make the team, what have you seen from him?
Yeah, just, again, every day improving. Felt like he really competed even in that last game, was around the ball quite a bit, made some plays on the ball. So, again, a guy that we feel like is only going to continue to improve and felt like was worthy of a 53-man roster spot.
Zach, how competitive was the tight end position? And your decision to keep Mitchell Wilcox?
Yeah, well, I think Mitch, certainly we got a lot of confidence in Mitch, but felt like guys really stepped up in that room. The depth of that room started to show up as camp went on. And so not an easy decision. There's again, just the way the roster fell, you ended up keeping three. But felt like that was a room that continued to improve, and there was some guys with in there.
Coach, with the changes in the practice squad since COVID, is it basically a 69-man roster? As opposed to the old days?
You can certainly look at it that way. Just with the way that you can elevate a player and then not have to subject them to waivers like you used to when you have to sign a player off the practice squad. So it really, again, you're looking at 21 inactives on game day. I know you only get 3 of those opportunities to elevate each guy, but that's probably the clearest way to look at it.
Zach, how would you define or how would you assess Jackson Carman's preseason and training camp, and what led to the decision to keeping him on the roster this year?
Yeah, I think you see a lot of really good things from Jackson over the course of camp, and you can lump him in with a lot of guys there that are maybe not starters right now. That you're just looking for the overall consistency, but you can see the talent, you can see the ability, and things to be excited about.
What do you like about the options you have for your third down backs this year?
Still competing. Travion Williams is much healthier now, so I think we'll be able to integrate him back into practice this week. And so, you kept 4 backs there, and we know what Mixon's role is going to be. He's a great first, second down back for us that we want to continue to feature any way we can. I thought Chase had a good preseason. Chris had a good preseason. Then now Travion gets a chance to jump back in the mix. So I think those roles are a little bit still to be finalized, and we got a couple more practices to iron all that out.
How difficult was the decision to go with Brad as your punter and release Drew?
Yeah, tough because Drew's a quality punter, and he's done great things for us, and certainly hope that he gets an opportunity somewhere else to further his career. But I think it speaks to Brad and the camp that he's had and the confidence that we have in him. He's jumped in, really doesn't appear to be a rookie, fits in like he's a vet. Have the confidence for him to show up in a divisional game week 1 and be able to perform like we need him to. And so pleased with what we saw from Brad over the course of training camp.
So often, Zach, rosters can change pretty drastically over the next week or two. And it's often said the roster you have at the first 53-man cut isn't the one you necessarily go into the season with. Do you see that kind of trend continuing this year?
Really impossible to predict today, and certainly evolves over time. I don't know that I confidently would have that answer. I could give you one, and my opinion could change 24 hours from now. So hard to predict. I think you're doing yourself and the organization a disservice if you're not looking at what's else out there. But again, I felt like this is the strongest 53 we've had from top to bottom, and so we if our roster stands pat as it is, we'll be very happy with that.
I think this is your youngest. I'm pretty sure this is your youngest roster. Does it feel like that, or is it something that kind of injects you a little bit, or how do you see that?
Yeah, I think we got really young talent. I think as your roster gets more expensive, it also gets younger in some areas as well. That's just the nature of the NFL and how it unfolds. But at the same time, I think that Duke has done a great job with the draft. It's all these guys we've drafted over these last couple of years feel like they're playing key roles for us, whether they're starters or depth players or featured on special teams. And so, it does speak to the young talent that we have, and that we're really impressed by a lot of those guys.
Zach, you have 2 practices this week before you get into game week next week. What will your emphasis be with these 2 practices before the team breaks for the weekend?
A mixture of things. There's a whole mixture of things. You start to preview Cleveland and get ready for that. You start to continue to fine tune some things that you're going to need over the course of the season. So there's a couple different things that we'll be hitting on these next couple of days.
Anything else for Zach?
Do you look at these last few practices as an extended part of game week, or is there a defined line between this is the end of preseason stuff and now it's game week once you get into that week?
It's a good question. I think we owe it to ourselves to start to preview Cleveland to be ready for that. At the same time, you can over prepare. It's when you're putting together 6 practices on a team, it can start to feel like a lot. So you want to keep the game week fresh for the guys, to keep their attention, keep their focus on Cleveland. So there's some things that we'll blatantly introduce. There's some things we'll subtly introduce, and then there'll be some things that we're just revisiting over training camp that we'll want to be able to pull out, in the first 5-7 weeks of the season, that maybe we didn't hit as much in training camp as we're going to need once the season goes.
All right, Zach, thank you for your time.
Thank you.